After a 3-day weekend, we're back. Above average temperatures. Rain along the way at times for this coming week. No major storms. Yes, I saw the 18Z run. Yes, I saw the 12Z European. It stands. More of all that and more right now as it begins the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is of course brought to you by our friends at Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, serving the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area. They'll get you through the rest of the winter if you need to be taken through by the hand, or they'll get you ready for spring because they've got salt, they've got sand, and they've got mulch. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number, and nowhere can you find better prices, especially if you're buying it in tons or cubic feet or whatever it is. And the website is
omnitruevalue.com. And welcome back, Joe Cioffi.
And yes, I got like 10 hours sleep really deep sleep. I put my head down on the pillow at 8:30. I woke up at 6. And I literally closed my eyes and I was just out. A couple of things to start off. First off, I know it's a day late and a dollar short, but happy Weather Person's Day, which was yesterday.
Yes. And
also, I will tell you that on my trip up north, Joe, there was absolutely no shortage of idiots driving with their brights on. None.
But why would they be driving with their brights on?
At night. They would just drive with their brights on.
I understand that, but why would they drive unless they were in a very dark, rural location?
Yeah, but you're not supposed to keep them on nonstop.
That's true. You see another car coming in your general direction, you turn them off so you don't blind the person.
Well, yeah, and there was one truck. Thank God he was going slower than I was, because I was able to get far enough ahead of him. But he had not only those super lights on the super headlights and then those other lights, but he had this across the top of the windshield, this giant rectangular light that just like pretty much sends the beam straight out. And he had all those lights on, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't see a thing. So I was able to fortunately drive up fast enough to get him out of my, get away from him. But anyhow, I have to tell you something. Saturday morning lows, as remarkable as some of those lows, by the way, and including, I love what they had in Mount Washington, okay, because they recorded at 850 millibars, and they're above 850 millibars, but at the 850 millibar level, minus 35, which is the coldest temperature they've ever recorded there, apparently, at the 850 millibar level. And also, what was so interesting was that the cold air mass was so cold and so dense that Mount Washington, above that layer, the tropopause was actually below the mountain peak, so the mountain peak was in the stratosphere.
That's incredible. That's
yeah. I mean, that was amazing, and I think also equally remarkable, since we really don't have any snowstorms to talk about, but equally remarkable to me was the fact that Boston, which I think got down to 10 or 11 degrees below zero, got to by noon on Saturday morning. By noon Sunday, they were, I think, at 52. So they basically had a 60-degree temperature jump in 36 hours. That to me was just less than 36 hours. To me, that was another incredible thing that happened with this when the cold air went out.
I mean, I here at the home base in Putnam Valley measured a 5-degree below zero reading just after 7:30 on Saturday morning. And meantime, about 33 hours later, we saw temperatures climb to 46 on Sunday afternoon, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So
that's a
not
51 degree jump, well,
not not
49
a
degree jump.
not a 60-degree jump like Boston, but still very impressive. And the coldest we had seen around here in 4 years. In fact, doing some record keeping on Saturday, saying, when was the last time we were this cold or as cold as this? And I found that on January 26th, 1994, it was exceedingly cold, 9 degrees below zero at White Plains. They only were able to get down to 1 above on Saturday morning this past weekend. But they were on January 26, 1994, 9 below zero. And doing a little bit of extrapolation and calculations here, I said that up here in Putnam Valley, we were at least on that day, at least 13 below, maybe even colder. So it was really cold back, some 20, almost 30 years ago. But it was cold here on Saturday, no question. That wind coming in waves. I mean, we lost power at my house at 10 o'clock on Friday night, and we thankfully got it back 2 hours and 15 minutes later. But and Renato was saying, oh, they'll never be able to get the power back tonight or connect anything. They have to go up on that cherry picker, and it's dangerous when the winds are blowing so hard. And that is true. But thankfully, they weren't blowing that hard at sustained speeds. I mean, they were roaring for, let's say, 3 or 4 minutes at a time on Friday night. But then there'd be about a 5 or 10 minute period when it calmed down and there was hardly any wind at all.
Right.
And then it would rev back up again. And then it would calm down and rev back up. So my thoughts were that if it were a cable or a wire that got loose or, came down, that the people at the local electric company were able to say, okay, it's calmed down for now. Let's get the heck up that thing and do the connections real fast before the next wave of extreme winds. I think that when we were getting those roaring winds, we were seeing winds gusting to something like maybe 40 or 45 miles an hour. Combine that with temperatures of -3 or -4 degrees, and that ain't pretty to be out and about on Friday night, Saturday morning.
Well, with that big temperature snapback, it reminded me, when you look at the maps of what happened this weekend and you look at the maps of what happened in 1934 when New York City got to 15 below, this is kind of how it could have happened had the upper trough maybe been just a handful of degrees further west and maybe a degree or two further south. Then you would have that's how you would see double-digit below zeros in New York City. So it's not impossible. It can happen, but it's one of those. That's like something like that is probably a 100-year event if it were to occur. But also in that particular one, because the trough ultimately pulls out and there was nothing behind it. So the same thing happened. There was a huge snapback from that bitter cold, and 48 hours later it was in the 40s and it was raining because another cold front came through, and nobody saw a flake or an ice pellet out of that. So,
crazy.
Yeah, if you're going to get something that bitter of that magnitude, it's quite likely that it's going to be something that's obviously not going to stick around, not at that extreme. So unless you've got some kind of secondary energy that's coming around with another shot of cold air that wouldn't be as cold as what you had, you're going to have that bounce. In this case, it was a huge bounce. So that impressed me.
It impressed me. What impresses me is the fact we were able to do what we did Friday night and Saturday morning, and there was not a flake of snow on the ground anywhere. Can you imagine, Joe, how much colder it would have gotten here had we had maybe 3 or 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground? Yeah. My goodness.
There wasn't much snow I don't think there was any snow on the ground in Boston either. So, and maybe a lot of places in that southern part of that.
But they were deeper.
Yeah,
they were deeper. And it was a mound. I guess you could call it the best way I could describe it is it was really a mound of very cold air, which, if you can imagine the mound or the mountain, so to speak, with a very sharp incline or decline. So let's say Boston was really in the midst of that mound of cold, but it dropped off very quickly as you headed southward toward, let's say here in the New York metropolitan area, and it really didn't amount to that much. I mean, it was colder, but nothing to write home about. Let's say 100 or a couple hundred miles further to the south of the New York City metropolitan area. But boy, I tell you, where it was really concentrated over central and northern New England, as we just mentioned with Mount Washington, that's where it really made historic, was a cold snap of historic note.
Yes, it was. And now there's an absence, just like what happened back in December with that bitter blast. There's not an ounce of cold air left, just about anywhere. And once again, here we are, starting a new week, and not an ounce of cold air of Canadian and Arctic variety, anyway. And it's actually remarkably quiet in the U.S. You've got a handful of winter weather advisories up in northern Michigan and also in northwestern Wisconsin. You got some winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings in the Cascades in Washington, and a few other things going on that look like dense fog advisories, I think. My light is so bright in here, I can't tell the difference. But maybe the ones in New Mexico are winter weather advisories, but whatever. They're very, very few. The rest of the country, just very, very quiet. I mean, this is going to be the kind of week where, weather systems are moving along. It's a very progressive west to east pattern, and you'll get a couple of cold fronts, and then we'll see what happens with the Thursday front after it stalls out, because there's going to be a wave on it, and it's amazing, Joe, the skepticism that we have at this point, having not seen anything of consequence all winter long. This would normally be a time where everybody'd be jumping up and down because the GFS on the 18Z run matches with the 12Z European run, which gives some frozen precip here on the back side of this late Friday night and Saturday, but nobody is even remotely in a position to want to believe it.
No, the way the models have been performing beyond, let's say, 3 or 4 days, why would you believe it?
Yeah,
because it's going to change. It'll flip, and overall, the way the whole pattern has been in the last ever since the astronomical winter began, save for what we had over the weekend and what we had over the Christmas holiday. I mean, my goodness, it's been incredibly mild, and it's going to be incredibly mild now as we move into the next couple of weeks. No sign of any, prolonged or prolific spell of very cold weather. I mean, that was really a slap in the face to the winter weather lovers out there. Yeah, you got your cold Friday and Saturday, but as you pointed out, Joe, it moved out so quickly, and by the time we were able to bring in any precipitation, it was the same old story: wet, not white.
Yes, a fast suffering it was. Well, we'll talk about that thing Friday night, Saturday. I see how there's a way, but again, I'm not confident. In the meantime, we actually have a nice looking storm that's developing. If you look on the satellite, it's really well defined there, southeast of Cape Cod. Fairly wrapped up the giant comma shape. That is very impressive. But the nearest precipitation, you got to get on a cruise to nowhere in order to get it, because it's all offshore. And in the meantime, if you look across the U.S., there's some patchy clouds here and there. You can see a little bit of heavier moisture moving up into the northwestern Great Lakes, and there's some stuff back in the Rockies, and in the Pacific Northwest there's some kind of storm system that's off the coast of California. But we had a gorgeous day here. Got to low 60s, blue, not a cloud in the sky. It was bright and sunny just about all day long. But I will point out that whatever happens up your way on Friday night, Saturday, I may see some snow here in northeast Georgia Friday night, Saturday with that upper trough.
And what's gonna happen is I'll get hardly anything to write home about, and you'll get like an inch or two.
Yeah.
and you'll beat me like you've been beating me for the last 2 years, built in terms of heat and cold and snow and whatever.
Yep, pretty much. That's kind of how I have it sized up. Radars are quiet up and down the East Coast. You could see this little patch that shows up east of Cape Cod, just how far offshore. Or earlier today, some of that stuff was over Cape Cod, at least some precip aloft. I didn't see anything that reached the ground, or if it did, it barely did. But the radars are quiet up and down the East Coast. Here's some light precip that's up and around the Great Lakes. That's moving on to the northeast, and here's the stuff that's coming crashing in to the Pacific Northwest. And there's your surface map at 4 o'clock this afternoon. You got a 980 low, roughly at about 38 and, let's say 66-ish, 65 and a half, 66. Nice tight little storm out there, but it's out there. And in the meantime, you've got a high centered over Ohio with, I wouldn't even call it cold air. It's temperatures in the mid-20s to low 30s. I mean, even into southeastern Canada, temperatures are all above zero. I mean, they're in the teens and 20s there. So this is nothing. This is not really any kind of quality cold air. And there's a low being analyzed in eastern Iowa that's moving northeastward. There's another low with a cold front up in Canada that's going to be moving to the east quickly with this cold front. That comes through, it looks to come through Tuesday night into Wednesday morning into the northeast. And then out in the west, we have just the beginnings of a flow off the Pacific. There's a low up in northern British Columbia, I think. I can't see where the border is for the next province. But the front extends out into the Pacific and is pushing eastward. Again, there's no major storms. I don't see any major storms anytime for the next 7 days for just about anybody. It's one of those, we'll call it a midwinter calm period, but there hasn't been a whole lot to talk about really in the last couple of weeks, particularly in the eastern part of the United States.
Yeah, and in some ways, for some parts of the country, it's good. It's good to have a calm period because there's some places that have been, really like it's like in parts of the West, it's like one day after another after another. So the fact that things have kind of calmed out from coast to coast is a nice break for most everybody. But things will get active. Things will get active again. Unfortunately, if you're a snow lover here in the Northeast, it doesn't look like it's going to get active in that regard. Although, like I said, as Joe pointed out, there may be something. The door may be trying to open a little bit for you at the end of the week, and we'll get to that in a little bit.
All right. Precip-wise, the next 7 days, there's a hole from Pennsylvania down into eastern Tennessee where it's basically a quarter of an inch or less. Half to 3/4 of an inch in New England, half to 3/4 of an inch in the southeast, half to 3/4 of an inch across the Gulf states, inch and a half to 3 inches from northeast Texas to southern Missouri, half to 3/4 of an inch of liquid precip around the Great Lakes, and several to many inches in a couple of bands up in western Washington, with inch and a half down to parts of western Oregon. But much of the Southwest actually is pretty quiet. Same holds true for the northern plains. As far as snow goes, obviously it's pretty lacking when even up in northern Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, the best you could do is a 20% chance for at least 2, and also for Maine. That's really sad. And then you go back up into the upper peninsula of Michigan, where you have a 50% or higher probability of at least 2. Whoopee for them. And we'll move along and go further to the west, where it's a little more active, but even here it's not anything crazy. It's up in the northern Rockies, up in the Cascades, and a little bit in parts of Wyoming and Colorado and down into New Mexico, where you have 20 to 50% chances for at least 2. I mean, in terms of big snowfalls, if I put the 8-inch probability, okay, yeah, the Sierra Nevadas and northern Idaho, yes. Everywhere else, no, except for a 0 to 10% chance there on the upper peninsula of Michigan. Isn't that just festive?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so where are we going with all of this? Gee, I don't know.
Excuse me.
So let's bring up. I got the upper air. I've got the 18Z run here as we take a look at it. At least we're not looking at something that 10 days out, which we know we can rule out completely. So look, here's how something could happen, okay? With an emphasis on the word could. You've got this very progressive pattern, you've got very little, if any, cold air to play with. Okay, Tuesday, you see this arm that's swinging across the northern Great Lakes to Hudson Bay. So that's the cold front for Tuesday. You've got energy down in the southwest. There's a cutoff low there in New Mexico. That's going to swing east and then right up toward the Great Lakes. That's your system for Thursday. But it doesn't really crack the ridge very much, so you still have a mostly west or west-southwest-west flow. Now you have a stronger shortwave on Friday that's swinging around the Great Lakes, actually forms a cutoff low, Joe, in eastern Kentucky and eastern Tennessee, and moves off the North Carolina, Virginia coast, and then moves out to the east. All right. If that's right, that's the only way something like this could happen. And in this particular case with the GFS, by the way, it actually gives substantial snow south of New York City, gives very little up from New York City north. It's all south and down in Virginia, which makes sense because of the track of the cutoff. So if this system, the tilt of the trough is positively tilted till it gets to the coast and then it kind of goes neutral. I guess if you got to make an argument and say, okay, if the cutoff is just a little bit further to the north and you get in and you get underneath it where there will be some dynamic cooling because you got to get the cold air from somewhere. So it's going to have to be manufactured by the upper low, and those are always dicey in both directions. Either you get enough, if either you don't get enough, and you're dealing with a cold rain or mixed precip or sleet that maybe some wet snow mixes in, and you get little or nothing out of it, or you can get a situation sometimes where it really goes gangbusters with heavy wet snow because the system is vigorous. So I think what you want to see in subsequent runs of the model is if this thing is a little more is as vigorous as it's being shown, and maybe instead of crossing North Carolina, it crosses Virginia and moves off the coast near, say, the Delmarva Peninsula. Then I think you may have a shot for something Friday night into Saturday, or during the day Saturday.
But now make a comparison between what you're showing us from the 18Z intermediate run and what the primary, the 12Z run showed 6 hours earlier.
Well, let's do that even better. Let's go to the European, which I think it's going to default to the 18Z, which is doesn't go out far enough, so we'll have to go back to the 12Z. So I'm going to match this up with the 12Z, and the 12Z. See, the 12Z European has more of it does cut it off down there in Virginia, okay? But it's not overly vigorous. You got the cutoff is probably centered somewhere in northern Virginia, which is why the European actually gave a few inches of snow and sleet. I mean, I don't even know how much of that is snow and how much of that is sleet. But that goes to the example of what I just said, where you get something that's not vigorous enough that you just get some cold air that cools the atmosphere from the top down, but it doesn't cool it down enough, and then it goes out. So
now we're talking about, I see on the timestamp here, what you're showing the European. This is more for late Saturday and Saturday night, not Friday night.
Right. I'm sorry, correct? But this would be for, say, Saturday and Saturday night. I'll just give a broad time scale here because this is actually at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. What I have up now with the trough at 80 and almost in full neutral tilt here is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday. So I would think that this would be, underneath the time frame. Then, of course, it goes out to the east, off the Jersey coast and out. So it's not that dissimilar. The 12Z European GFS, I believe, had more of an open trough. Oh, here it is. No, this is the 18Z. I'm sorry. Let's go to the 12Z. That 18Z wrapped up cutoff, the way the GFS has, is something that I have to pay attention to here because that's where I could get a surprise. But the GFS has more of an open trough, okay? It just sort of it tries to cut it off, but it had just more of a very sharp north-south trough that moves on through. So you wouldn't get the dynamic cooling unless you can get the thing to cut off the way the 12Z European showed and the
18Z GFS.
Let's take a look at the icon, shall we?
Surely.
The icon, because it's got to make it even more obnoxious, has the cutoff low down in Georgia, Joe. I mean, it's way south. So I just want to see what it does with precip here. Yeah, I mean, look at this. It has nothing. I mean, It basically says the front that comes through on Thursday goes out far enough south and east so that if you get something that forms, say, off the southeast coast, some sort of surface low, it goes out, way to the south, and you get next to nothing. And you know what? Don't bet against it. That's not impossible. And we could also might as well look at the Canadian because we just might as well. And I'll do it on a tighter view here. So let's look at the upper air on the Canadian. And the Canadian, Joe, has an even more stretched out, positively tilted trough that just, it really doesn't amount to much of anything at all and just progresses it along. So those are your choices. Any bets on which ones are going to have the better chance of being correct?
This far out, I wouldn't even put any money down yet. I'd probably have a much better chance figuring out who's going to win the Super Bowl on Sunday, as opposed to which model I'm going to believe for Saturday or Saturday night. But the way the winter has gone so far, I want to tell you something. This reminds me so much of the winter of 72, 73. The winter of 72, 73, we had a few spells of very cold weather, but no snow. And what storms that we did see during that winter season of 72, 73, for the most part, passed off to our south. I remember listening anxiously at 35 minutes past the hour to 1010 winds way back when. And that was back in the day when Dr. Joel Myers himself used to make an appearance on the radio. He never does that anymore. But every time we had that chance, he'd always talk about a storm bringing snow to Virginia, a storm bringing snow to Charleston, West Virginia, or the southern tier of Pennsylvania, or the Delmarva Peninsula. Always they seem to pass right underneath us and miss us and not give us much of anything. That was the winter, of course, but we had 2.8 inches total to date so far, still the smallest amount of snow ever for any winter in 154 years of records at Central Park. But that may fall if we don't, see any significant snowfall for the remainder of this winter. This may go down in the record books as the least amount, but still, hold on, because
you need one event that doesn't have to really produce very much in order to prevent that record from happening. But you know what? It's going to be like pulling teeth even to get that one event the way things have been going.
All I ask for is 2.4 inches. How difficult is it to get 2.4 inches? And I'm asking that question in early February, but yet it looks like almost an impossibility. Now, what in the world are you showing in terms of total
All right,
snowfall?
so this is on Pivotal Weather. This is the GFS 18Z, how much snow it produces from that thing on Saturday. So it barely gives a half an inch to New York City and Long Island, and it's got a 0.1 at White Plains. But it's got it gives 10 inches to Trenton, 8 to Philadelphia, 10 to Millville. It's got a ribbon of a foot plus from central Delaware and eastern Maryland on up into parts of southeast PA, south central PA, and also in northern Virginia and western Virginia, anywhere from 6 to 12 there. And then it sort of tails off until you get down to me where it gives, probably gives me an inch. I just put the cursor right where my latitude and longitude is. It gives an inch. And we can look at the 12Z European to see what that, wrong one, sorry. Got to start all over. I always hit the wrong one. There's the European, and then there's the European high resolution one. And
just to confuse you.
Yeah, so I just always pick the wrong one. So here's the European. And, these, let me make this clear, folks. These maps are no way an endorsement of what, we're not sitting here going, hooray, hooray, this is all going to happen and we're going to get all these numbers that the model spits out. So, I mean, here's the Europeans' view of this. And this is, let me go out another 12 hours just to be safe. So the European, which is not as cold because the upper low is a little less vigorous. As I said before, here's where it spits out, an inch, 2 inches, and not much more than that. Okay, although it is showing it more, there is more stuff further north on this one. And then you see what tails down the Appalachians to just about to me, where I've got a half an inch being printed up on the map on that little, or 6/10 or whatever that is. So, look, I kind of can see how it happened. I think what we have to look at is, is, are the models which went all were going with this sort of, progressive stretched out trough. Now you've got the GFS and European wanting to make a vigorous cutoff, of various strengths, but a vigorous looking cutoff low in that trough as it approaches the East Coast and goes neutral. I mean, how real is that? I don't know. That seems suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and maybe it's just a one-run wonder, and the 0Z runs will take it all away. We don't be surprised if they do.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm saying that on Monday. I wouldn't be surprised if they take it all away on Wednesday or Thursday. So
Take it away.
I'm not jumping up and down.
So, really, I'm looking at this. I'll put the radar up of the GFS, and so here you go. So tomorrow looks nice. Although it'll be a little, temperatures will be lower tomorrow because we got a high up near northern Maine. So some of that chillier air that's to the northwest gets in here. Then on Tuesday night, you got this cold front. I threw in the chance that there could be a shower or two. Suddenly, the GFS went from being vigorous to not being vigorous. Then here comes another low that starts to come out of the southern plains, runs up into Illinois, into Lake Michigan there with some snow in Wisconsin, the dark blue snow. We get some rain that comes in here on Thursday. Then the front goes by, stalls out. The next energy swings in with that next trough. You got rain that comes in late Friday night. And then during the day, Saturday or Saturday night, later in the day, Saturday night into early Sunday morning, that's when you have this low that's offshore. I misspoke earlier when I said Friday night, Saturday. I stand corrected. So it's for later Saturday night and Sunday. It's got
Right.
that nice little patch of dark blue snow. Then that goes out. There's no real cold air behind it. Here comes the next one with the low that goes to the lakes with the next round of rain around the 15th, and then that goes out. And then another low that goes to the lakes with rain, and that goes out. And then it's got something with a stalling front again. This is on February 18th as the calendar ticks. And something here on the 19th. Who knows if that's real? And then another system around the 22nd. Who knows if that's real? And another one that follows after that. The one thing I will say, well, I'll say two things, Joe, on the overall pattern. One is, and I won't hold my breath, but you look at this out after 240 hours, and you see the ridging that goes on in Alaska and in the Canadian Northwest. So the EPO is going to go negative, and the ridge that's sitting, basically flat east-west of the Gulf of Mexico and off the southeast coast kind of shifts a little bit further to the east. And that allows for more troughing to drop into the U.S. But, now we're at February 22nd. And the second thing I will point out is that the stratosphere, looking at the maps of the last 2 days of what's going on in the stratosphere, it was showing, I'm going to go back to the 0Z run. The 0Z run last night, Joe, showed the polar vortex splitting in two. There have been a few runs that have done this, that have split it, and you see all of a sudden the vortex drops down. One goes into Siberia, the other one drops into the western lakes and over the Dakotas, or eventually migrates to the western lakes with a big upper high building across the entire polar region. So, you see this, and you think that if this couples down to the surface, we could have a very interesting late February, early March. Okay. The problem is that, as you get subsequent runs, like the last two runs, no split at all. Or if there's a split, you could barely find it. So, I wouldn't put much stock into that because of the fact that it's been on and off telegraphing a split. It never gets inside the 10-day time frame, just like when we talk about hurricanes and tropical storms that show up on the models. Talk to me when they get inside 7 days. Talk to me when the stratosphere shows a split inside 10 days, and then we can have a more meaningful conversation.
Well, Dr. Judah Cohen on Twitter the last couple of days, he is referring to this, by the way, what you just discussed, Joe. He says, "Is this really legitimate, or is it just a Lucy teasing Charlie Brown with the football one more time effect?" But he does say that the weather models are growing more confident in a major disruption of the polar vortex. How big? A split or just a displacement of what will be the impact to our weather, or will all ado about nothing?
Right.
So, we've seen this. We've seen the models do this before this winter, and we've all ended up with nothing but egg on our faces or just disappointment. But it's doing it again. How many times can it go to the well, so to speak, before something finally comes out of this? And maybe later this month or early in March, we may finally see the pattern that everybody has been, or all the winter weather lovers have been waiting for so very long. And we'll just have to see what happens. I like, though, his comparison to Lucy teasing Charlie Brown with the football one more time.
The only other thing I would add is that, unlike the other times in this recent sequence of the last 3 or 4 days, the European's been showing it too. So up until now, it's just been the GFS. Now the European, apparently, I don't see it, but I don't get to see the European 10 millibar. So, but this is what I've been told and what I've gleaned from reading Dr. Cohen and a few other folks that I've seen post about it. So I don't know. That's a long range thing.
And you want to talk about long range? Our friend at Weather Trends 360, Captain Kirk. We had him as a guest about a year or two ago, and on his site, he's saying that while many of us would probably throw the towel in on this winter, or much of this winter is already behind us, according to him, since next winter will be an El Nino winter, he is, on his long range maps at least, suggesting, or at least strongly hinting, that we're going to get a real turnaround in terms of cold weather stretches and also snow. And that, as I've even mentioned that before, that in those years where we have a paucity of snow, where we end up in single digits, at least at Central Park, with a lack of any kind of significant snowfall in one winter, the next winter that comes along, the very next winter, we more than make up for it. So as bad as this winter has been, perhaps the winter of 2023, 2024 will make up for all of the sadness and disappointment that all of you snow lovers out there have gone through so far. And I'm not throwing in the towel yet, because, again, we still have a lot of February and also March to go through. And it would just be our luck that just when we're on the verge of setting a new record for lack of snow, all of a sudden, like that winter of 97, 98, maybe even coming after the official start of spring, we do finally get a significant or substantial snowfall. We'll see.
Oh, we've got super chat hits tonight from Ken Musillo. Thank you, Ken, for hitting the tip jar, and the chairman, Scott Briller, who also hitting the tip jar tonight. Thank you, Scott. Saying Mount Washington Observatory set the lowest wind chill ever in the United States, minus 108 record. Previous record was negative 102.7 WNEW FM. Yes, exactly. All right. Speaking of which, I think I have a Briller Jeopardy in here somewhere. So let's...
Before we go to Briller Jeopardy, can I post something? Can you give me sharing capabilities?
Yeah, good. That'll give me some time to find what I have to look for. Sure. Hang on a second.
Okay. And this is gonna be something near and dear to your heart, Joe.
Okay. It's probably the Blizzard of '78. You're not gonna play that tape, are you?
No, I don't have. I know I have it. I haven't been able to find it, but one day I will find it, and when I do, I'll play it. But I don't have it.
Okay. You should have. I think I turned the share on. Just a second. Yes, I did. So it's all yours. Let me get myself out of the screen.
All right.
So folks don't complain.
All right. So there you go. This is the front page of Newsday, the Long Island newspaper, from February 7th, 1978. But this is a picture taken at high noon, February 6, 1978, the day of the great blizzard of 78, which dumped um, at least a foot and a half of snow in New York City, something like 15.3 inches, but it was probably a lot more. I know that I measured in the Bronx 22.2 inches for this storm. Out on Long Island, they had something like 26 inches. In parts of Boston, they had like more than 30 inches of snow, and the city was flat out closed for like 3 or 4 days. And in parts of Rhode Island, 50 inches of snow. That was on this day, February the 6th, 1978. And that was, to that moment in time, that was, I think even to this day, even though we had bigger storms, the blizzard of 96, and we've had a few of them during the decade of the 2010s, we always look at this storm kind of like as the benchmark, because this storm had everything. This storm had snow, this storm had cold, this storm had wind, this storm was, and neither Joe nor I remember anything like this storm. Even the Lindsay storm in 1969 was really nothing compared to this storm. You had to go back actually to maybe the triple winter snow of 1960-61, where we had a couple of storms that approached blizzard conditions. This flat out was one of the great snowstorms of all time, not just in New York, but also from Washington all the way up to Boston.
It was it was also a home run for the LFM model, which was was one of the few models. It's not like today where you have 5 million models and and 90% of them are wrong. This was that the PE model, the PE/AVN, and that was it really. And they didn't go beyond. There was no 60-hour. There was a 72-hour, but of the AVN, but there was nothing, beyond that. So at least that we saw, there was nothing beyond that.
Yeah, it was. And you talk about the LFM. The funny thing is, the LFM. All right, yeah, it did hit a home run, so to speak, with that storm, but it sure did lousy 17 days earlier.
Oh yeah, well, that goes without saying. Yeah, and that was also after 9 years of not seeing a big storm, and you got two. You had the first one, which was a nice surprise, and then the second one, which was the '78 storm, which was, really was a gangbuster storm. That's the night I got hit with a bowl of pasta in my face. We won't go into that.
I wasn't going to bring that up, but yeah, I remember that very well. And yes, Mr. Cioffi made snow lovers all over the tri-state area so very happy, because back then, KW035, I think a lot more people listened to the National Weather Service weather radio back then. And who was the voice of KW035 the night before this big storm but Mr. Cioffi? And you were actually reading a statement that was typed up by Mr. Harrison, right? Who was
Joe Harrison? Yes,
Joe Harrison, who was on duty that night. And I've got the tape. I don't have it here with me, but one day if I ever get a chance to find it, I'll play it. And you just blew me away, Joe, when you got to that point in the discussion where you said, if this storm system measures up even part to its possibilities, it'll easily match the storm of January 20th, which gave us like 14 inches of snow in New York. And I said, my God, we're talking about, and it was the first time ever that I could remember the National Weather Service, before a storm began, actually calling for a foot or more. And I know that sounds strange now to a lot of you, because we've become used to or accustomed to with the models and the technology, where if we see a storm coming and we think that there's going to be a foot or more of snow, we'll say it 3, 4, 5 days in advance. But back then, that wasn't done. Usually what happens is that the forecast would start off with 3 inches or 6 inches, and then as the storm progressed, you went up the ladder until finally you ended up with 18 to 24.
Right.
But that was the way it was back in the 60s and 70s. it's not really that way to any great degree anymore. When it looks like there's going to be a big storm, you'll have the Weather Service going for a foot or more. But that was the first time I could ever remember. It just blew me away when I heard Mr. Cioffi say, "Forecast for tomorrow: snow heavy at times, a foot or more possible." What? What?
Yeah, I know. All right, let's get Briller Jeopardy here. So tonight, Joseph, it is the average snowfall for the month in the month of February. The chat board is, of course, is invited to participate. And Frank Scalera hitting super chat tonight, hitting the tip jar. Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much. So here we go. The first city tonight, and I'm going to put the city down on the chat board, is Hartford, Connecticut. Hartford, Connecticut.
Hartford. Not Windsor Locks, but Hartford, right?
Hartford, not Windsor
Hartford.
Locks.
Yes.
Not East Hartford. Not South Hartford.
Or West Hartford.
Right.
There's a
or
West
North
Hartford.
Hartford County or West Hartford. We're talking about beautiful downtown Hartford. Home of the Hartford Insurance Company.
Didn't they lose? I think it was during that first storm in January of 1978. Was it Hartford, where the roof caved in on a sports arena?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
it was either Hartford or Providence.
I think it was Hartford. I think it was in Connecticut or whatever. Okay. Anyway, I'll say 8.
Mr. Reyes says 8 for Hartford, and let's see if anybody's come close. Actually, Joe, I'm going to, rounding it off. If you said, I see that Craig Carlberg said 15 inches. Now, by Price is Right rules, he would not be the winner because he
went over.
But we're going to suspend it for tonight. So he says 15, and Leon Probitsky said 14. 14. And the answer is 14.8. So I will consider both of those gentlemen as winners. Now the second city tonight is Memphis, Tennessee. Hold on, let me put up Memphis first. Memphis, Tennessee, and hold on. I put Memphis TB. TN. Memphis, Tennessee. Okay.
Memphis tuberculosis? No.
Yes, exactly. So we're seeing numbers coming in, Joe. What is your guess?
I would say 3.
3, says Joe from Memphis. Helen Bertona says 2. Jason Barry, Frank Riccio also say 2. Bobby Livingsworth said 8.5. Now just think about it, folks. If you know the New York normals, just kind of use your geography, skills here and sort of map out that if New York City is up at around 10, Memphis is going to be less than that. So don't go with a big number. Rosemary Osborne said 2. Nobody said under 2, Joe. The answer is 1. 1 inch.
1. 1.
Yes.
Wow.
Okay.
I would not have thought that. I would have thought that at least it would be a little bit higher than that. But
yeah, 1 sounds a little low. But I don't know if that's downtown Memphis. I'm assuming that's the airport. The next one, Joe, is Dallas, Texas. Dallas, Texas.
Dallas seems to get a lot more ice than snow. Now I would say 1.
All right, you say 1. Keith James says 0.5. Helen Bertona says 0.5. Michael McGuire says 0.5. Chris Alley said 0.2. David Fuller 0.4. Latex Dreams 0.5. Mark DeCara 0.2. Rosemary Osborne 0.5. Leon Probitsky 1 inch. And Gen X Boomer says nothing, which is no, that's wrong. Tom Contino says 2 inches. The answer, Joe, is you said 1 inch.
Yes.
Chuck Cardillo said 1 inch, and Leon said 1 inch. The answer is 0.9. 0.9.
Well, round it up and we win.
That's correct. Okay, now Indianapolis, Indiana. Indianapolis, Indiana.
Indiana. I just want to make sure in my mind where that is and whether or not they could be subjected to any kind of lake effect, because there are places in Indiana that do get lake effect.
Yeah, mostly northwest Indiana. Although every once in a while you get something that kind of extends southward. Frank Riccio says 6. And
that's what I would have said.
Chuck Cardillo says 6, and Joe Rayo says 6. And the answer, and Patrick Darcy says 6. And William Uber says 4.5. Steve LaPointe said 4.8. Bobby Livingsworth, you're stuck in double-digit land at 17. Michael McGuire, 7.5. The answer is 6.
Yay!
Okay, and the last one is Charlotte, North Carolina. North Carolina. Come home to Carolina, the fluffy long grain rise. Sang that for 233 miles. Anyway, Charlotte, North Carolina, folks. And they're coming in fast and furious.
8?
You saying 8 for Charlotte, North Carolina?
I'm not sure where it is relative to
it's in
the mountains.
It's not in the mountains. It's in western North Carolina, but it's not in the mountains.
Oh. Well, maybe not 8. Then maybe more like 4 or 5. I'll say 4.5.
Cliff Robertson, 1.7. Steve LaPointe at 1.6. Jason Barry says 0. Okay, that's not it, Jason. They all get something when we put these on here. So 0 you can rule out. Chris O'Shaughnessy says 2. Northern Grace 2.3. Sammy Presley 7. X-Gen Boomer 3.7. And Steve LaPointe pointing out that Charlotte is the largest city in North Carolina, though it is not the capital of North Carolina.
And they have a big 50,000 watt, what we call a flamethrower, one that at night you could hear in 37 states, WBT in Charlotte. And when I was much younger, I used to listen to get or see what the weather was down there. So
yes,
I remember listening to WBT on a night when they had like 20 inches of snow. That was fun to listen to a city that doesn't usually get anywhere close to that amount in a single winter season, getting it all in one big lump.
Michael McGuire pointing out that Charlotte is in the Piedmont section of North Carolina.
Right.
Charlie Porch says 0.24. Chris O'Shaughnessy with 2. Cliff Roseboom 5.1. And Quincy McCoy says he's heard of WPT 1110 in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yes.
The answer is 1.1.
That's all they get is 1.1.
Yeah, you know what? It's surprising to me. There have been some big snows in that part of North Carolina, of a foot plus, somewhere in the early 2000s. I think from 2000 to 2020. In one of those big storms, there've been a few of them that have buried them. I think maybe it was in 2010 or the 2010-2011 winter that happened. But they could go years without seeing much of anything. And also they tend to get that's another area that tends to get more in the way of ice. Oddly enough, last winter I had a few days where I had ice issues because of fog, with temperatures in the low 20s from the mountains, and everything would ice up. On a couple of those occasions, I couldn't get on the roads for a couple of days. But so far this winter, that hasn't really happened. So, for whatever reason, I guess it has to do with whatever. Obviously it has to do with whatever pattern we're in. But the pattern from last winter is a little different than the one that's in this winter. But we get the ice fog up here on Cook Mountain, which is where I live on. That's it.
Well, I didn't know I heard a long pause after Ice Mountain. I figured, well, Is he done yet? And I guess you were done.
I'm
And
done.
I'm just looking at all the people who are mentioning all the other. When I was young, I don't know about you, Joe. I used to actually listen. The hobby is called DXing, where you listen to radio stations that are beyond your area on the AM dial. And a lot of times, in advance of a major weather event or a big storm, I used to like to DX. I used to listen to WBZ out of Boston, WBT in Charlotte, North Carolina, WKBW up in
Yeah, I
Buffalo.
remember WKBW, the Cleveland station.
The Cleveland station used to be 3WE, WWWE in Cleveland, 1100 on the radio dial. And now, at least in recent years, they changed the call letters to WTAM. I don't know why. I mean, WWWE was, one of those call letters that you would never forget. But I guess somebody bought the station and decided to change. And it was one station that I used to listen to in Fort Wayne, Indiana. WOWO, WOWO. You can't hear WOWO anymore, and the reason is that there's an urban contemporary station in the New York metropolitan area. I don't know what the call letters are at 1180 or 1170 on the AM dial. That's where WOWO is, and they bought WOWO in order so that they could jack up the wattage on the station here in New York, because if they did that when WOWO was 50,000 watts, they would conflict with each other. They would interfere with each other. So whoever owns the station in New York went out, bought WOWO, lowered the frequency, lowered the power from like 50,000 to 10,000. And so now you can't hear WOWO in New York anymore, especially since there's another station locally that's on top of that frequency. That station that I speak of here in New York used to go off the air at night so that you could hear WOWO boom in. And I do mean boom in. There were some nights it sounded like WOWO was right here in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
But I used to love listening to WOWO because WOWO was in Indiana. I could get, the weather, what was going on out there, and the temperatures. I can't do that anymore. I miss WOWO.
Yeah.
You know,
81
I was
likes, by the way, so far, Joe. 81. So we're 19 shy of 100. Can you think of anything else that you want to talk about tonight? Is there any? I don't have anything to rant about. I was just happy to get home.
yes. Well, we're happy to have you back, and you were reunited with JJ. I'm sure he was happy to see you.
Yes, 15 hours. It took me a little less than 15 hours, which was about average. I went a different way this time. I went 95 to 85, and 85 leaves me about an hour and 20 minutes from my house, but it's one road, so I don't have to. I'm not going in the other direction. It's a little shorter, but you spend about 3 hours going through the mountains of western North Carolina, and then into Tennessee before you get on 81. In this particular case, with this route, I'm on interstate all the way except for the last hour and 20 minutes, which is a straight road, and the only I get into the mountains only for about half an hour. So although it's a really vicious mountain road, and doing it at 2 o'clock in the morning, I made sure I had a cup of coffee at midnight so that I would stay awake, because
Right.
the road it's a two-way, it's relatively narrow, and there's a couple of lovely hairpin turns on that thing. So um,
You ever
so
have no dose?
no, I don't. I won't. I don't even like taking a Tylenol.
I
So
remember. I remember back in the '60s on radio, they had a no dose commercial where you hear a guy being interviewed and he said, I was on a long straight highway, and all of a sudden, the next thing I knew, I was looking up, and there was a tractor trailer truck heading right for me. I was in the wrong lane. I don't know what made me get up, and then all of a sudden you hear the announcer say, when you're tired at night, or when you're driving a long road at night, he said, take no dose. And I
yeah, I just don't like to. I really do not like to take medications unless I absolutely have to, of any kind. I know no dose was basically just like a caffeine pill, and I don't like to do those. I had Red Bull once. It is for somebody who has no. I have no sweet tooth. Okay, I really don't. In fact, the more sugar that's in something, the more I abhor it. Well, I don't know how anybody can drink that stuff. It was Joe. It's like I don't. Think of the sweetest thing you've ever tasted and multiply it by about 50. That's
Yeah.
how sweet it is.
Yep.
It made me gag, and it didn't work. That was the thing. It didn't even work. So I did that years ago when I was driving to the Outer Banks driving to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, uh, and we drove overnight for vacation. So no, this time I just stop at the Pilot and I got a coffee, and that was enough to keep me awake. But uh, it was and I got out of the truck. We're up to 93 likes, by the way. 7 more, folks. You're lurking there somewhere. If you like the show, hit the like button so we get over 100. So when I got out of the truck, my body was still going at 75 to 80 miles an hour. So I felt like I had just stepped into an earthquake. The ground felt like it was shaking. And even when I got into my house, my floors were I was wobbly. My floor was shaking. It's all that time in motion, going at 75 to 80 miles an hour all the way down. I know somebody's probably going to say I was going above the speed limits around here, like at 70, but they don't stop you unless you're doing 90, and I won't do more than 75 or 80. But it was, I went right to bed. I could barely sleep, and then I finally caught up last night when I slept. So I'm not doing this again for quite a while, if at all.
By the way, I'm not going to get into the story of what started to tick me off here on this, but if you are traveling anywhere in and around New York, it is now the order of the day for fundraising on some of the roadways. My daughter got a ticket for $250 for something that was absolutely not her fault, but apparently there's a new rule or a new law, and Joe, got 2 tickets for $50 a piece. One for going down into the Bronx to see my mom for the last time before he passed away the following day. And then I got another ticket at the same intersection in the Bronx, this time heading for the funeral mass. And
what was the $250? What was the rule?
You're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this. Picture, if you will, the center median of a roadway.
Yeah.
I don't know what the roadway is. I don't know if it was Route 9 or Route I-84, something like that. But picture a roadway, and here down the middle of the roadway is a concrete median.
Okay.
And on one side of the median is a parked school bus, or maybe a school bus letting off school kids.
Right.
On the other side, there of the road, there are cars that are going by, right? And you figure, well, the school bus is over there.
You're supposed to stop
on
both. You are supposed to stop on both sides.
Yes.
Yeah, you're supposed to stop on both sides.
She didn't know that.
Yeah.
And even though they're way over here and there's a concrete divider or whatever, and the school bus is stopped. Now I know she's a safe driver, and I know that when she sees the school bus stopped, and when she sees the stop sign extend out from the side of the bus, you stop. You don't obviously you wait until the bus is in motion again, or you wait as the kids come off the bus. But you're on a roadway going one way at a certain speed. The bus is completely on the other side of the roadway, and there's a barrier that's in between you and that side of the road. The bus is stopped, and you get ticketed for passing the school bus in that
so there was
situation.
There was a cop nearby.
No, I think it was an automatic.
Really, they have a camera on the thing. Oh
right.
My God! Oh right. Boy! And what did you get it for?
For years and years and years, I went to PS14 in the Bronx. In fact,
this wasn't recent then. This was years ago when you talk. You said you
No, this
just.
was recent.
Oh, okay.
This
This
happened
was
to
all
me
right. You're right. You
in the
said it
last
was on
couple
the
of weeks.
last days you went to your mother, and then the day of the funeral.
Right. In fact, when I went to PS14, I was a AAA monitor along that roadway, and so I am well acquainted with that road. Apparently, when you're on I-90, not apparently, when you're on Interstate 95, you'll see a sign that says East Tremont Avenue, and you exit. Now, when you exit, there's a sign that says yield because
Yes.
there may be a car coming on, but rarely is there a car coming down that roadway, and in most cases, you can just go straight on through. On this particular day, my sister called me and said, Mom is not doing so well. Maybe you ought to come here because
All
this this
right.
this
I
could be
remember.
good. So I'm rushing as fast as I can from where I am. I'm about 55 miles north of where my mom and my sister live, and so I'm rushing. I get to that part where it says yield, and I looked in the rearview mirror. There was nobody coming, and so I just continued at a regular speed. Well, now what they apparently have is a camera. I don't know where the camera is, and they are clocking your speed. That now is a school zone for 25. I went 36, and so because I went 36 and a 25, I got nailed for a $50 fine. And this happened to me not just once but twice because the following week, because of traffic conditions in the morning, was a little late trying to get to the church for the funeral mass. Went straight through that again, boom, and I got the ticket again today, 36 in a 25. So now and what upsets me is the fact that there's no sign that says school zone. There's no sign that says slow down. The only thing that's there is a yield sign, and I got nailed twice now in less than a week in a zone where I have been traveling for years,
Right.
decades, and never got anything, and was just doing my normal thing. Maybe I was going a little faster than normal, obviously, to try to get to my mom that first time and trying to get to the funeral mass the second time. But I got nailed twice now by this camera. I don't know where the camera is. It's posted somewhere now. And I said, this is fundraising because in this case, they must be getting tons of money from people who just come off of I-95, continue, maybe slow down from 55 down to 45 or 40 or whatever. They must be making a mint right there. And I'm really, and, I could argue I probably could have gone to court down in the South Bronx and argued about this, showed the death certificate, and explained I'm trying to get to my mother. But I said, the hell with this. And from here on, I'm going a different way now when I visit my sister. I'm going to stay away from that. So if you're ever on that intersection of I-95 and you see the East Tremont Avenue sign, and it's Hollywood Avenue, by the way, beware.
All right.
Beware because you're gonna get nailed.
Well, you're
If
right.
you don't know.
I do have a small rant. So, well, first of all, I I don't pay any, when you drive the roads down here. Uh, if you want to take if you're going into Atlanta, you can take the express lanes, and then they have tolls for that, but it's minimal stuff. It's a couple of dollars, or depending on what exit you're going to, it could be 50 cents or 75 cents. So anyway, on my drive, there are no tolls until you get to Washington, where my GPS, I think I told you on Thursday, put me on 395, and then for some reason at 1 o'clock in the morning, it put me on the express lane. I was the only one on the express lane, and so it was $3. Fine, okay. But when it was all said and done on the trip up to Long Island and then back, I spent $75 in tolls, $37.50 each way, $20 on the Jersey Turnpike, $12 for the GW Bridge, $12 for the Throgs Neck. It was $6.60 each way or whatever it is now. I don't know. So it was $75, and that was one thing. But the thing that really hacked me off. Now I haven't stayed at a hotel in God, I don't know how many years since I really went someplace where I had to stay at a hotel. Either I was staying, on vacation with a friend's condo or something along those lines. So I stayed at the Marriott Courtyard in Ronkonkoma. It's a nice hotel. Can't complain about the hotel. what I discovered was they charge you for everything. Okay, they don't even have free coffee in the morning downstairs. They charge
No
you for the
continental
coffee.
breakfast.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Everything you have to pay for. But the thing that got me was that when I left and I checked out, and I pre-booked on Expedia. I got the email for the bill. It was 2 nights, and it still wasn't cheap either. It was $159 for the first night. For Thursday night, $179 for the second night. So it was $169 average plus tax. I figured it would be about $365, $370 be the total bill. The total bill was $392, and I look at the bill, Joe. They charged me $10 a night to park my truck in their parking lot.
Oh, give me a break.
Now, I didn't know
Holy
this.
mackerel.
I mentioned it to a few of my friends, and they said, oh, yeah, hotels now, since the pandemic, hotels, and especially because uh, the travel business right now is booming. Everybody's traveling, everybody's going someplace or has been going someplace. Everybody's got all this extra money, so they're all going to, so they're paying through the nose for everything, and that includes for hotels. Apparently, this is now more common than not. I suppose if you're staying at a hotel that's in a more rural area, I haven't really asked about here. I doubt that they do it here. But yeah, they charged me $10 a night to park my truck. And the thing is, I was visiting my sick friend that lived about 4 blocks away. If I knew that, I would have left a truck at his house just to save the $20. But that was a shocker to me. That bothered me. It's funny with me when stuff like this happens. I could get something like this bothers me far more than something that would be a higher amount of money. For whatever reason, it's when something like this happens, when it's petty and it's like they're sticking pins in you. That makes me more angry than say getting a ticket or something.
Well, during the pandemic, when it was really raging, Renata and I, we went on more than one occasion to a hotel, and the hotel let us know that they don't make beds on a daily basis.
Yeah,
they wait like 3 or 4 days.
They still do that. If I wanted them to come to make the bed, I'd have to pay extra for it.
Right.
And when I went to see my daughter in Columbus, Ohio during the pandemic, and it was like that. There was somebody behind the counter, but they had all the screens up and all the rest of it. But yeah, it was an eye opener. I just didn't expect to get charged for parking on Long Island is pretty easy. It's not a big deal, especially in Suffolk County. But I didn't think that the hotel would charge you for parking, but they do.
Well, it's a different world, Joe.
It is
a completely different world. But anyway, the people on the chat board, let me make this clear again: that my daughter, when she was driving, she saw the bus stopped. She saw the light. She may have even seen the thing, but her assumption was it's way over there. I'm on this side of the roadway. There's a barrier. There's not a barrier, but there's a center median, a concrete center median. So why would it be dangerous to continue moving along when the bus is stopped over there and free traffic is coming? So they actually expected, I guess, for her to stop on a roadway, whatever it was. Again, whether it was 9A or 9 or whatever. And so far as Tom Contino says, 1994, the toll on the Throgs Neck Bridge was $3. Hey, Tom, guess what? Joe and I could remember going on the Throgs Neck Bridge, and the toll was 25 cents.
I remember 25 cents. 50 cents, 75 cents. Everybody made a huge deal. They doubled it, and then they went to 75 cents, and then they went to $1. And then you had to get you had the exact change. You have to drop the coins in. People would always try to figure out like dummy coins and, put those in instead.
You know what I'm going to do? What I think I'm going to do with my situation with the, going 36 and a 25 or whatever. And again, there's absolutely no sign that's posted that says school zone, or maybe there is now, but the sneaky way that they've done this now by putting a camera and just arbitrarily billing everyone who goes over the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. I am going to write. I'm not going to go to court. I'll pay the fine, but I'm going to write a letter to. I know it's going to do nothing, but it'll be a catharsis on my part. I'm going to write a letter to the Department of Motor Vehicles or wherever this thing is going to go, and I'm also going to CC it to Governor Hochul here in New York, and I'll have documentation of and my explanation.
How much was the fine for going through for that one?
50 twice. 50 on the day when I was rushing to see my mom for the last time, and 50 for trying to get to the funeral mass.
No surcharge on top of that?
No surcharge.
Okay.
And no point. And they also, as if they think that they're doing you a favor.
If you pay for
no
it,
points.
No points if you pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. But this is fundraising in the first degree, I think. I have traveled that route countless numbers of times over the past several decades and never have had a problem. All of a sudden, within the span of a week, I get nailed twice. Obviously, a way for New York to make the money, and I'm not happy.
Yeah, we don't have red light cameras here in Hooterville.
No, you got to go to go to Pixley for that.
But we do have cow crossings.
Yes.
So we have to yield for those.
Now Helen Bertona says, I bet you the sign was before the yield. I would have seen it, Helen. I would have seen a sign. I would have said, hey, there's something new. Now they got some. I notice everything when I'm on the roadway, and especially, and this is coming off of I-95 onto Tremont Avenue, a service road at Hollywood Avenue, immediately adjacent to PS14, my old school. And there
might have been a sign, and it might have been, somebody may have graffitied all over it or taken it down or knocked it down. The last time I got a ticket like that for going in a school zone, Arizona, 1985. We went to Arizona on vacation. We were only married for about a year. Had a nice time, seen the Grand Canyon, all the sights. We were in Phoenix, and the cop pulls me over, and I said, "Excuse me, officer. Why are you pulling me over? After all, I know what I was doing. I was only doing 30 miles per hour, and you could see the speed limit is 45." He said, "I see that." He said, "But it's from 3 to 6. It's like the school zone is in effect, and they have these little buoys about yay big in the middle of the roadway, which you can easily miss. And with a small sign that says, school zone, school time 3 to 6, 25 miles an hour." So I was doing like 30 and a 25, and I got nailed for $75 back then in Arizona.
In Arizona.
Well, you know what?
And Renata got so upset that she wrote a 2.5-page single-space letter, typed it out to the whoever it was in Arizona, complaining about this, saying that we were tourists and we didn't know, and it was and the way you had the signs up and everything. We never heard from them. We sent the money, we sent the check. She sent her little letter. Again, she just had to let it all out.
Well, you just reminded me two stories that I'll have, and then we got to go. It's along this subject line. This was many years. One was many years ago. I'll save that one for the second story. But when my daughter was playing travel soccer, so we would have to drive to other states to play one game. So we would drive to. We had to go to Maryland to play a game once, and the Montgomery County, they purposely set up portable speed cameras on the route to the soccer field to catch people and give them tickets going over the speed limit. They would hide them. You didn't even know they were there. They were hidden in like the bushes. And I happened to see where it was. Anyway, somebody I know, they went to the soccer field and they forgot something and had to go back to the hotel to get it. So what they didn't know was she got a ticket for going through the speed camera the first time, and then She went back to the hotel, which was maybe about 2 minutes or 3 minutes away, to get what she had to get. And then she drove through the speed camera again and she got 2 tickets within 10 minutes for the speed trap. And many years ago, in 1982, when I was moving, I'm sorry, in 1986, when I was moving to from New Orleans to Long Island, so my wife and I, we each drove up in our own car. We were following each other up at 95 in Maryland. My wife gets pulled over for doing 65 in a 55. Okay.
Right.
I pull over to wait for her, and the cop wrote me a ticket for doing
impeding traffic,
for doing 65 in a 55.
Oh.
When he saw that we were married and that we were following each other, he wrote us both tickets. I see that just what I was saying before about the $10 parking pit. That pit to this day, okay, to this now that I've remembered the story, all the anger I had about that is coming back, because I could see you gave my wife the ticket. I pulled over because I had to wait for her because she was following me, and he gave me, the guy was an absolute prick. I think I could say that on the air. Okay, but he was a vile human being, and I know he watches this show. So so at this point in his life, he's probably well into his 80s. I hope you're drooling wherever, in a very painful way. I know that's a mean thing to say, but that really angered me, because he didn't have to do that. He purposely sought me. He did that on purpose just to get another ticket. It was a $40 ticket at the time. It was
no. We all know there's a quota system.
Oh, but the guy was just was just.
I was once.
I got to watch my mouth, because I really, no. The anger's coming back for something that happened 40 years ago.
I was once in New Jersey. I was once in New Jersey, and New Jersey, they've got like 1,000 different signs, and you're looking and you're trying to, and you get, and I was like totally confused. I was trying to find the Outer Bridge crossing, and a cop pulls me over because I was like wavering and whatever, and he pulls me over, and I roll the window down. That shows you how long ago this was. And I'm yelling at the cop, which is something you do not do. But the cop looked like he was only like 22, 23 years old. And then I pointed to him. I said, I want to ask you a question. And I want a straight answer from you. How do you get to 401 when I'm looking at signs that say the Oranges and Newark and 35, and they're all jammed together? And it's so confusing. And you got to understand, look at it from my point. And he let me go. He let me go because he saw the reasoning here. He said, "Yeah, I understand. I know, buddy. I know all about it. I understand your anger," and he let me go without, somebody else probably could have hauled me in to, throw me in jail for the night. But I was just so angry that night. Depends on who you get, I guess. But
yeah,
you got a bad guy. I got a good guy.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I got my Suffolk County. I still got my Suffolk County PBA card from 2021. Fortunately, I have a lot of my closest friends were all police officers, because they're all retired now. So I knew a lot of the guys. I knew enough of the guys on the force that I never really got into trouble. So all this talk, though, you could just imagine that I'm going to come on tomorrow and say, "Guess who got a ticket?" And I don't want to get a ticket. I'm thinking back on my trip now, thinking, did I pass any school zones that I was driving and they have cameras hit? I don't think they've done that in Suffolk County yet. I remember they were talking about putting them in stop signs or something, like you said with the yield sign, that they had the camera there hidden away somewhere. But oh well.
And I promoted our show to somebody today, and I said, we talk weather. We talk mostly weather. Sometimes we get into other subjects, but most of the time we don't. So if you're watching tonight, the person I mentioned this to, you could see what I meant by sometimes we go and deviate off into different types of subjects. But that's what makes this channel, I think, very popular, and people can, go with what we're saying.
We are human. Rumors to the contrary.
Exactly.
We get up in the morning like everybody else and put one foot in front of the other and get on with it. So,
right.
People think, People often think that somehow we're on television that the doves come down and take it away. It just doesn't work like that. We have the same problems that everybody else has. Believe me, we have the same problems. We deal with the same things that everybody else deals with. That's all.
And Monty
Nothing.
Hall told a story once about a bunch of people who were coming onto the show, Let's Make a Deal, and they were all dressed up as convicts. He got like 6 people in a car dressed up in orange jumpsuits, and they were late to getting to the show, and so they went over the speed limit. A cop pulls them over, and like here comes the cop walking up to them, and they're all dressed up in orange jumpsuits, and they're all like, "Oh no, what's gonna happen? We're gonna get thrown in jail." And the cop says, "Don't tell me you're going to Let's Make a Deal." They said, "Yes, we are. We are." He says, "All right, well, follow me." It's
Yeah.
a good cop.
Well, the show went on long enough that we could actually do an extra commercial. So the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight was brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number. If you don't need them to get through winter, you can use them this spring to make sure your house and yard look terrific. They have the best prices anywhere. OmniTrueValue.com is the website. So I could even run an extra commercial break on YouTube if I want, but I'm not going to.
What the hell?
I'll let YouTube put it in for me. All right, so everybody back tomorrow night at 7:35. Maybe we'll have something to talk about. Maybe we won't. We'll see. So
and Tom Contino says the rants are better than snowstorms sometimes.
they certainly can be. I'm just trying to. There's not. If I think of anything, I got to write. Stuff comes to me during the day that happens to me that I often want to talk about, and then I forget.
Yep.
I got to write those things down.
Oh.
All right, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for taking us over for 100 likes. Thanks for the super chat hits tonight. 7:35 on Tuesday. Good night.
Good night, folks.